there's a similar story playing out here that we have seen with antibiotics. So in terms of resistance developing over time, emergent species. So I think that's what our panel here is here to talk about today. The serious threats, not the trivial, and we're going to get past that ick factor thing.
There are definite challenges in the world of fungus. And fungal infections, I always like to refer back to Rodney Dangerfield as getting no respect. I think oftentimes we forget about fungal infections. We don't want to hear about fungal infections, and we don't, unfortunately, give them the same respect and credence that they deserve in taking care of our patients. So we've done a great job, actually, of beating down bacteria, but we haven't done the same job beating down fungus, and so fungal infections continue to remain, a major concern and a problem.
Fungi, as we've heard, are difficult to diagnose. They're not as prevalent as bacterial infections. So typically, if a patient is presenting, and these are patients that are cancer patients, they're transplant patients, they're immune compromised, they present with signs of an infection, immediately the suspicion is a bacterial infection, and they're provided antibacterial therapy. 24 hours later, if the bacteria isn't cultured, then there's a suspicion of a fungal therapy. The problem is the evidence, the data shows that delaying treatment, effective treatment by 24 hours increases your chance, your odds of dying from a fungal infection 30-fold. So that's an important number, right? So it emphasizes the point of getting effective exposure to effective treatment right up front. And that's why some of these rapid diagnostics are really important.
I want to come back to the policy because this is important. As I understand it, the GAIN Act, which passed Congress 5 years ago, 2012, which generating antibiotic incentives now, is that the acronym what it stands for? So, basically trying to address a problem here, which was what economists would call a classic market failure. And that is we know from public health authorities that we have a problem with antibiotic resistance. And yet the pharmaceutical industry, which has long, proud history of developing antibiotics, had, for business reasons, largely retreated from the field. They didn't see the kind of profits there that they saw in some other therapeutic categories. They got out. Congress reacted and said, maybe we need to create some new kind of incentives. And that, there's a whole bunch, and Jeff, you're the expert on this. You were part of the working group, right, that helped put that together. So, but there's a parallel here with antifungals. The antifungals got folded into this, which not that many people realize again, right?
Right. Yeah, so the GAIN Act enables companies working on new products that address an unmet need, some significant unmet need, meaning multi-drug resistant bacterial pathogens or fungal pathogens. You get what's called QIDP status, Qualified Infectious Disease Product status, which provides under the GAIN Act a number of important benefits. One of those is an additional 5 years of data exclusivity. So you can have a drug that is about to go off patent, which, from a commercial perspective, isn't that exciting to investors to fund your company. But with the additional 5 years of data exclusivity, that can be attractive. It also provides for fast track and the opportunity for orphan drug status. So there are a number of important benefits to getting that QIDP status. And there are several members of this antimicrobial working group that wouldn't exist if not for the GAIN Act. But I think everybody understands that that's just a great start, but there needs to be some other really important incentives to foster innovation and to foster investment in these companies because of this market failure you speak of.
Now, one of those would namely be pricing, right? Because this is part of the issue. A GAIN Act could provide new incentives and you could get through the FDA, but if the payers say, well, we're just not going to pay much for that drug, you're not able to reward your investors.
That's right.
Are you seeing any movement, and maybe you guys have any opinion there on is there any willingness in the payer community to step up a little more for the antibiotics or for the antifungals?
We're trying to see if there are ways actually to create incentives that will make companies and investors willing to put money into the anti-infective field. Because this is what we are seeing also. A certain amount of reluctance of lukewarmness now of investors putting money into the biotech companies that are doing anti-infectious drugs.
We're having this conversation as we speak with our board. I'm sure everybody is we've got a portfolio of agents, and for the earlier programs, we're trying to decide what direction to take. And an incremental challenge, I think, in the antifungal space comes down to epidemiology, and Tom's the expert. But we actually built a database from the ground up. What possible indications could one pursue in the antifungal space, regardless of superficial, toenail, mucosal, vaginal infections, invasive? And it ended up to be about 85 different disease entities. The practical reality is, though, you can only develop about 4 or 5 indications because all the others are so rare that you could never pull a regulatory program together. What drives a lot of the sales are these less common illnesses because the docs are using the agents because they're now commercially available. So one of the challenges we've had raising capital is getting people excited about those particular indications that you can actually develop and get to an NDA. So that's an incremental challenge here that I don't think we have in the anti-infective space, is that the bulk of the sales are coming from indications that you really can't pursue from a registration perspective. But coming back to the GAIN Act, just having that incremental, maybe fast track status for us hasn't been enough to get investors excited about the space. I think we need to have some more dramatic offset of development costs and or payer protection.
One I mentioned previously is the Disarm Act, which changes the reimbursement paradigm for QIDP products. So one of the challenges for antimicrobials is that they're reimbursed on a DRG code basis, drug-related group code basis, which is capitated. You have an MRSA infection or certain fungal infections, there's a certain payment that you get, right? And so it incents the pharmacy director to use the cheapest drug because they want to keep as much of that payment as possible, right? So they want to use a cheap drug, and it's probably one of the few therapeutic areas where a physician is going to be limited by the pharmacy director to use a drug that may not be active. You might have 20% resistance in that institution, but you're going to get, ceftolozane or something that's probably not going to work. And meanwhile, the patient gets worse as you cycle through these drugs that aren't working until finally, okay, give them the branded. Disarm Act should change that. It provides what's called an NTAP, or New Technology Add-on Payment. So basically, it provides an incentive for hospitals to use a newer branded agent because they know they're not going to lose money because they will get reimbursed from it. So it's more akin to the cost plus model. In this case, cost plus 0, it's not cost plus 6, that is used for reimbursement for higher price oncology agents or immunotherapy. The other one is the READY Act, and that is an R&D tax credit. So we're all pre-revenue companies, which we don't pay taxes on revenues. But basically, it's whatever you have spent in your development program, as long as it wasn't partially underwritten by government grants or contracts. From phase 1 to phase 3, you add all that up. On approval, you get a credit for all that money you invested. And that's a transferable credit, which means, even though you can't benefit from it because you're not paying taxes on revenues, maybe a Pfizer would like to buy that. Well, you can sell that at maybe 10% discount or whatever you negotiate. So these are examples of things that if they pass this year, I think can make a much bigger impact.
It's a game changer.
Than GAIN did.
Yeah.
For example, strategies like that helped a lot with tropical diseases. Actually, to have a lot of drugs developed for tropical diseases was the possibility. This was a legislation that if product was approved for specifically for certain tropical diseases, they will get a priority review voucher that will allow a company actually to accelerate the NDA process of any product, and this could be sold to other companies.